everybody, and welcome back to my channel. We've already learned what a birth chart is, what the parts and pieces that make up a birth chart. Looking at a birth chart, we can see what we're really good at, what we need to work on, and what the real purpose of our soul is in this lifetime. It's kind of our blueprints, if you want to look at it that way. But what about astrology in real time? How do the current positions of the planets and their movement through the zodiac affect our lives? Today, I'll be talking about transits. So when you read or watch a horoscope, what you're looking at is the movement of the planets right now. You're learning about what the planets are doing in real time. Where are each of the planets in the zodiac? What sign are they in? And how are the planets interacting with each other through aspects? For example, right now as I'm filming this video, Mars is at 13 degrees of Aquarius. So we know that everyone will experience that energy in a general sense, but how do we narrow it down to look at how specific individuals based on their birth chart will experience the energy of Mars or the energy of any other sort of transit that's happening? We can see where Aquarius is in someone's chart. We can look at what planets are in the sign of Aquarius in that person's chart, and then we can get an idea of how that transit is going to affect that person. For example, me personally, I have 3 planets in the sign of Aquarius: my Venus, Moon, and Sun. And right now, Mars is creeping up on where my Sun lives at about 17 degrees of Aquarius. I can expect to feel super energized and want to really define myself and have this kind of energy that's inspiring me to figure out who I am. My husband was actually born with Saturn at 6 degrees of Aquarius, so when Mars was moving past that point at the beginning of the month, it was giving him energy and inspiration to want to define his career, to define his set of responsibilities in his life. And it just so happens that at that time, he really was making an extra effort to do that. Of course, we don't just look at conjunctions when we're looking at transits. Perhaps the sun is making a square to your natal Pluto, and you might feel this tension and like you really need to completely change and transform something in your life. Or maybe even the sun is opposing your natal sun and you feel pulled into being something other than what you are, and you might even feel like people around you are expecting you to be something different than what you are. So just to veer slightly into a more advanced part of this, we're not only looking at the energy of the planets that are in aspect, the transiting planet, which is the one that's moving around in real time, and the natal planet, which is the planet in your chart. So we're not just looking at the energies of those specific planets in general, we're looking at what do those planets represent for you as the individual based on your chart. So for example, in 2008, Uranus was transiting over Lady Gaga's natal Mercury. So her specific Mercury rules a part of her chart that deals with imagination, illusions, and art. And of course, we know on top of that, the general energy of Mercury is a planet of communication. When we look at where in her chart Mercury is placed, it's placed in a space that deals with her career and her global reputation. So according to her chart, we know that she is driven to make a career out of her voice, and she uses her voice to express her art. So how was that energy activated by the Uranus transit? For Lady Gaga, Uranus rules her 9th house, which among other things is a very expansive house, and it kind of carries this good luck and fortunate type of energy. In 2008, her album The Fame was released, and suddenly everybody knows who she is. Her notoriety expanded globally tremendously, and she was able to get her voice out there, and people were able to appreciate her art and the art that she was creating with her music. The way she was viewed in the world, her global reputation was completely changed forever during this transit. So when we're looking at transits though, we don't just have to focus on planetary aspects and how the transiting planet is conjuncting or squaring or whatever the aspect is, how that transiting planet is making an aspect to a natal planet. So we're gonna look at another one of my personal favorites, and that is Janis Joplin. Janis doesn't have any planets in her natal chart in the sign of Sagittarius, but in 1967, when she played at the Monterey Pop Festival, and that kind of set her career in motion and people began to know who she was, Saturn was actually transiting through the sign of Sagittarius and transiting through this space in her chart that, while it doesn't have any planets, we'll see that it actually is a significant part of her chart. So similar to the Lady Gaga example, Saturn for Janis Joplin rules a part of her chart that again deals with art and imagination and illusion. And on top of that, because Janis is a Capricorn sun and the sign of Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn, Saturn is a very important planet for her in general. It has a lot to do with how she defines herself and her identity in the world. So this transit was happening when Janis was using her voice to express her art and was starting to gain fame. Of course, not everybody is going to become a Lady Gaga or a Janis Joplin or whoever because of one single transit. There's many, many things that are at work. And when we look at transits, we actually want to look at multiple things and multiple transits happening at the same time. And when we do this kind of astrology, not necessarily just the predictive of what's going to happen, but when we look at the astrology of things that happened in the past and try to draw those correlations, we're not just going to look at a birth chart and the transits. We also look at things called progressions or maybe a solar arc chart. There's a whole world of other tools that we as astrologers use to make these connections between the planet's movements and what was actually happening in that person's life. But I just wanted to pick out a few examples to show you how you can look at the energy of these planets and these movements and correlate it to a specific individual's chart and see how that transit affected that specific person based on their chart. A lot of it has to do with the individual. And some of that we can't even really detect with astrology, in my opinion. I think we're all given free will. And if something is in our chart and deep within us that is inspiring us to go do something like become a musician or to create art, it's up to us if we want to listen to that drive and to go pursue those dreams, if we want to be brave enough to go and do it, because not everybody is able to tap into that kind of bravery. And some people, you know, for one reason or another, they don't follow that urging that's deep within their soul to go do that thing. So those transits aren't necessarily going to bring about the same type of things as they would for someone else who, due to their free will, is working with the opportunities given to them and is being brave enough to go and do something that other people might call crazy, but that they know is really their soul's calling. But if you start to understand how the planets work in real time and you pay attention to the current transits and what's going on, and you have an awareness of your own chart, you can start to really work with those energies and move and shake your own life and start to make really cool things happen because you're aware of what energies may be working with you at that moment, or what energies may be not necessarily working against you, but things that might be kind of holding you back and saying, wait a minute, you need to go do this thing or learn this thing before you can really take the next step. So when you feel like nothing's working out for you, if you understand what's happening in the transits, in the current astrology and how that applies to your birth chart, you can understand that there's other things that maybe you need to be focusing on at that moment, and that the other thing that you really want to do might have to be put off while you accomplish these other things first. So I hope you enjoyed this video and you have gained a basic understanding of how transits work in reference to a specific birth chart. And I definitely encourage you to go and do your own research and start to see which planets are really important in your chart and start to follow the movement of those planets and see how that kind of correlates to the things that are going on in your life, and even look back at things that happened in the past and what the transits were at that point in time, and you can start to see how these things all come together. It's so cool. So of course, if you're interested in getting a reading with me, one of the things I look at in a reading are the transits. We can take a look at what the current energies are, how those are affecting you, and how we can work with them to get you closer to where your soul wants you to be. If you're interested in such a reading, of course, the link to my website is in the description box. And with that, I will say thank you so much for watching this video, and I will talk to you in the next one.